Hello and welcome to Shattered Lives, Reach Ireland's crime podcast. I'm Paul Healy and I'm joined by Michael O'Toole in a completely different county today as per usual, aren't you, Mick?
Yeah, I'm out on the road today, Paul. I'm down in sunny Killarney in County Kerry. I'm attending this annual conference of the Association of Garda Sergeants and Inspectors. So I'm in my hotel room at the minute.
Very good. And when does the party start?
So we're recording this earlier than usual. Today is Tuesday afternoon. For various reasons, we just have to get it out a day early. So the banquet is at 7 o'clock. So it's now 5 o'clock. So we need to get this party started, man.
We do, yeah. Sorry, we're coming to you a little earlier this week, but we did say we'd try to be consistent and try to give you a weekly podcast. So that's what we're doing. We're doing it while we can. And I want you to be able to get to your pints and your wining and dining of various members of An Garda Síochána. So we won't keep you too long, Mick.
Haley knows I don't drink really anymore. So I was out last night and I had one glass of wine. That was me. In bed by 11:15.
No, you can't be doing that. You have to be out and socialising. Come on.
I might stay out to 11:30 tonight. We'll see.
Oh, okay. It's very dull. Come on now. You have to go on zeros, have a bit of crack.
I did go on a couple of zeros, but I think it's fair to say AGSI is not as revolutionary as the Garda Representative Association. They're a wee bit more, what should we say, cautious.
Yeah, they're seasoned.
Yes, so the GRA might have.
Don't get insulted by that. I don't know anybody. No. I hope that people know what I mean by that. Experienced in the game longer. No,
look, I think the GRA might be a bit more to the barricades, whereas the AGSI are a wee bit more cautious.
Yeah, like yourself.
Neither is a criticism. Yes, age and like a good wine.
Indeed. Well, look, we wanted to start the podcast as we always do. We always mark homicides when they occur, and there have been two violent deaths so far this week. I suppose kind of one after the other. And the first incident occurred on Sunday up in Killybegs in County Donegal, where a 61-year-old man by the name of Eddie Friel was discovered dead at his home in Harbourview Drive. And Gardaí immediately launched an investigation upon the discovery of his body. And there is a homicide investigation in relation to that. Now, I have to be somewhat cautious in what I say about this because there is a man currently before the courts. So only this afternoon, James Spendley of St. Cummins Hill in Killybegs appeared before a special sitting of Carrick-on-Shannon District Court, so some wash away from Killybegs, and he was charged with assault causing serious harm under Section 4 of the Non-Fatal Offences Act in relation to the investigation. And so Guard Detective Niall Brady of Ballyshannon Garda Station, he gave evidence of arrest, charge and caution, and he said that he arrested Mr. Spendley for the purpose of charge just after 4 a.m. on the 15th of April and charged him at 4:47 a.m. The accused made no reply after caution, and the detective said that the accused was handed a true copy of the charge sheet. So the accused was represented by a solicitor in court, and the court heard that there were ongoing issues in relation to an application for bail, and that the person who is Mr. Spendley is on disability allowance, and he was granted legal aid. So that matter is put back, and he was remanded into custody, and he'll appear again on the 24th of April in relation to that particular offence he's accused of.
And then there was another death at the other end of the country in Youghal in County Cork overnight. Yes,
so Gardaí are in the midst of, are set to launch a murder investigation in relation to the death of Daniel O'Sullivan, who was a 31-year-old man who we understand is originally from Mallow in County Cork, but had been kind of living rough in and around the county and indeed in other counties like Waterford over the past number of years. He's a 31-year-old man, and he was stabbed to death just outside a pub there on the North Main Street of Youghal last night, so Monday night around 10 o'clock, just before 10 o'clock. There seems to have been, the investigation seems to be going in the direction of there was some kind of a row that spilled out onto the street outside a pub there, and that Daniel O'Sullivan was stabbed in the stomach, in the abdomen area. And so he kind of stumbled his way back into the pub looking for help and collapsed in the premises. Emergency services were called to the scene. They did their best to work on him there, got him into an ambulance, brought him to Cork University Hospital, where he was declared dead later that night. So Garda are set to launch a murder investigation. And a man has since been arrested, and as at the time of the recording of this podcast, that man is being questioned under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act. We understand that man handed himself in to Middleton Garda Station in the early hours of the morning, and Garda are still awaiting the results of a post-mortem, but they by all accounts, they suspect this guy was stabbed to death, and so they will probably launch a murder inquiry. We, as we always do when we work on these types of stories, try to find out a little bit about Daniel O'Sullivan. And, he has had a tragic life. He has a conviction for manslaughter, so he served a significant amount of time in prison for an incident that happened all the way back in 2015 in Cork City. And you're familiar a little bit with this, Mick.
I think it was a French man, and it's how many times have we covered cases like this on Shattered Lives and in the Star and the Mirror, Paul? It was one of those one-punch assaults. So someone is punched, and in this case, or in the usual cases, unfortunately, it's not the punch, it's the fall that causes the catastrophic injuries. I've covered so many of these, and this appears to have been the case in relation to Mr. O'Sullivan's conviction for manslaughter.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll give you some of the details just of what was heard in court at the time. It was a 2016 trial, and, O'Sullivan did plead guilty to the manslaughter of Vincent Morgaine in Lower Oliver Plunkett Street in Cork. September 15, 2015 is when it happened. There was drink involved, and so I'm just reading out the court detail. Yeah, he punched him, knocked him to the ground, he banged his head. But O'Sullivan kicked him in the head when he was down. So that's the added aspect to it, I suppose, particularly violent. But he received a prison sentence for that, and he actually received a further part of his suspended sentence was reactivated later on in 2021 when he wouldn't engage with the probation services. But there was a lot of evidence in relation to this man who has now himself lost his life in violent circumstances, that he was addicted to heroin, that he was living rough, living homeless, had drink issues, And so I was told by those who have known him in more recent years that he had kind of turned his life around in that regard, that he has a girlfriend and he had moved in with her in the Youghal area. And this tragic incident has happened. And I spoke to his sister today. Sam is her name, and she wanted to pay tribute and say that as far as the family are concerned, they want him to be remembered for how they knew him as a loving brother, someone who had a big heart, they said, and he'll be missed dearly. And she said that the family will be hoping to secure justice 100%, is what she said to me.
So the suspect who presented himself, as you say, he's been held under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act. That gives Gardaí 24 hours. Now, that can be lengthened because normally the period of detention is suspended between midnight and 8 a.m. The prisoner is offered the chance to have it suspended. Sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no, but it could be, tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, before any decision is made on whether anybody will be charged in relation to this death. But it's just interesting. I was looking at my records there. You'll know that I keep data along with Conor Feehan in the Indo about homicides this year. And if you remember, there was a cluster of homicides around January and February, and people were saying, this is going to be another bad year. These two killings, they're the first killings, the first violent deaths since the end of February. So March and April, so 6 weeks, basically, between the last violent death and these two. And, that's why I'm always very cautious about people, saying you have to, a week tells the whole story of a year. You really have to look at the whole year, because you can go, as we have, you can go weeks and over a month without there being a suspicious or violent death. It just,
and then they come along.
It happens, and then they come along
together.
Yeah, and I mean, I've certainly had experience of, you could have had 5 murders in a week, and you could go 6 or 7 weeks like we have now without anything else happening. I suppose it's just
the way it goes.
Really. Yeah, it's just the way it goes.
And unfortunately, while you're off and away, these things happen, and you're left to work on them. But that's a very small sob story from a crime journalist who has to work on his own. But listen, that's the way the job is, isn't it? So
that's you can just never know. You wake up. I mean, that's the nature of our job, Paul. You wake up, and the morning news, or if you've got a message from somebody, dictates your whole day, and you can be sitting planning to do something, and then we go off on a whole horrific tangent because somebody's been murdered or there's been another tragedy.
It's a sad reality of it. Tell us a bit. Obviously, there's a lot of news that comes out of these Garda conferences every year. These are more senior ranking Gardaí sergeants and inspectors. And the Garda commissioner obviously comes down to this particular event, and there's a press conference and people get an opportunity to ask him questions. But he's also giving a speech later on today. Just what's the atmosphere like down there, and what are the topics that are kind of coming up?
They seem to be disappointed about a thing called the operating model, which is a reorganization of the entire Garda force. So without getting too technical, the way it used to work would be there would be a Garda district, and several districts would form a division, and several divisions would form a region. Okay, so the DMR, for example, in Dublin is a region. You've got DMR South Central, DMR North Central, DMR, East, West, DMR North, right? They all come together to form a region. The way it has now changed in the last 6 years, so that you now have, in the districts, there would be what was called the district officer, who's the local superintendent, who is in charge of the district. So what has happened now is the divisions have been sort of merged. So there'll be a chief superintendent in charge of the division, but rather than, for example, having a superintendent in charge of Ballyconnell, that superintendent will be part of the Cavan Monaghan Louth division. And so there will be a superintendent in charge of crime investigation, superintendent in charge of community relations. There'll be 4 or 5 different specialities within that, rather than there being a geographical expertise. In other words, the super in charge of Ballyconnell. Now, Gardaí of all ranks appear to be opposed to this, and they say that it is a barrier. It forms a barrier, effectively, or loosens the connections between the people and the Gardaí who serve them. And they say, for example, in the Cavan Louth Monaghan division, which seems to be a focus of angst, most of the resources in that division go to the east, which is Dundalk and Drogheda, County Louth, because that's where the most people are. And the resources over, say, in West Cavan wouldn't be as good. So they're opposed to that. They say AGSI and the GRA, and I think the superintendents, have all expressed their opposition to this new plan to Justice Minister Jim O'Callaghan. Now, Mr. O'Callaghan was down here, and they were quite angry in that at the Templemore graduation a couple of weeks ago, the minister said he was heartened that Gardaí seemed to be supporting this. And they were saying, we told you the exact opposite. So if all these associations are against it, who's telling the minister that it's working well and that they're very happy with it? So look, to be fair, Minister O'Callaghan, he stood there and he answered all the questions, and he's not told about them in advance, and lots of subjects came up. That was one, but it soon veered off. As you know yourself, Paul, it does happen. And one of the things that we wanted to ask him about, and really we'll talk about this, is the case of Michael Gaine. You've reported on it extensively. I'm only coming to it really the last couple of days because I was away in Lebanon, as you know, and you were in charge of doing that. So we asked him about that. And he said, and I thought this was really, really interesting. He said he was in Castleisland. Now, that's not the headquarters of the investigation, but obviously, he was visiting the Castleisland Garda station, so you can bet that all the supers and the chief from the division were there. So he did get a briefing about it. And he was asked, is it murder? And he said he has not been given any indication of that by Gardaí. Now, we all raised our eyes at that because, Paul, you can fill people in. This man has been missing since the 20th of March and there's been no trace of him. So, is it fair to say that it has all the appearances of a murder investigation? Or all the resources of a murder investigation? It
certainly has all the resources of a murder investigation. And I suppose as time has gone by and answers have not been forthcoming, I suppose everyone has kind of jumped on that sort of bandwagon that this must be a murder. This must be foul play involved. And indeed, I'll have an interview out later today with former Garda detective Alan Bailey, who led Operation Trace, as people may know, for 13 years, massive inquiry into some of the more infamous missing persons cases, missing women, Ireland's missing women, that famous vanishing triangle. He looked into Jojo Dullard and Annie McCarrick, for example, Fiona Pender, and lots of other cases.
Deirdre Jacob.
Yeah. And in his opinion, he believes that that foul play were involved. Now, obviously, he's not privy to the information that investigating Gardaí have that isn't maybe in the public domain, but he says based off the information that is in the public domain, he said that something sinister has clearly happened to Michael Gaine. That's his professional opinion. He said the fact that he hasn't been found to date suggests something sinister as far as he's concerned. He thinks it's odd, and the fact that Michael Gaine went to that shop in Kenmare in Centra on the day he went missing, the 20th of March, and appeared to buy phone credit. This is the last known public sighting of him, yet the phone is found in the Jeep. I don't want to use the quote verbatim because, look, there's obviously sensitivities involved. There's other possibilities of what could have happened to Michael Gaine, including tragic circumstances, and that can't be ruled out. But Alan is pointing to the buying of phone credit and just how maybe that's not consistent with those types of circumstances.
I know what you're saying. I think we can read between the lines there. Why would he buy phone credit?
So then you look at maybe an accident, right? And he's saying based off the size and the scale of the search so far and the level of resources that have gone into it, that they would have found some trace of him at this point had there been an accident close to the farm. And they haven't. So he is suggesting that there must be some foul play here, and that's his opinion on the matter.
You know what I found very interesting? I know you did the story about it because I was away. The local superintendent issued it. Was it on Thursday or Friday? He issued a fresh statement.
Yeah, I mean, and pretty candid, admission that Gardaí are no closer to finding Michael Gaine, that they don't know what's happened to him, and pretty openly saying we haven't a clue. And could they have collated 230 lines of inquiry? Each one is a job that they have to work on. They've had over 100 witness statements. 1,500 hours of CCTV and dashcam footage, and yet they don't know what's happened to him. And now you have the senior most Garda in the country, the Garda Commissioner, coming out and saying, what's the quote, the exact quote?
He was, well, we were down, the Commissioner again, he was very frank in his questions. People think that's sort of like, we tell the Commissioner what we're going to ask him beforehand and we stick to this. It doesn't work like that. And, you don't ambush him, but you ask him whatever comes to mind. And because the Commissioner or the Minister told us on Monday, look, I haven't been given any indication after a briefing that Garda believe it's murder. We wanted to ask the Commissioner, but now he said he got a 2-hour briefing. And he basically said, look, it's still a missing person case, which is very, very interesting, right? It hasn't been upgraded to murder. He was asked about foul play and he just kept on stressing a missing person case. Now then, and a reporter said, so you have no leads? And the Commissioner said, no leads. Now then, he didn't correct himself. He began to clarify it, and he basically said, look, we still don't know what happened to this man, but he didn't say no leads. Oh no, I don't mean that. He just went to explain a wee bit further. So essentially, the Commissioner, number one, top guard in the country, said they have no leads in this case. But so there's a couple of things that I found really interesting. So it's nearly 4 weeks since he disappeared. We do know that they have seized Mr. Gaine's, isn't it, a RAV4 Jeep?
Yes.
Right. So if there'd been violence, if he'd said, if he'd been attacked in that car, there would have been forensics in that car. And I would say, from my experience, forensics come back very quickly. I think there mustn't have been any sign of violence in that car, because I think even that would have led Garda to upgrade it from a missing person to at least suspicious. You know what I mean? So and what really struck me was that local superintendent, when he said in his statement, Michael, if you're alive, contact us.
Yeah, no, to be fair,
that was interesting.
It was. But to be fair, also, he was asked the question, do you think he's alive? And he said this is still a missing persons investigation. And then he appealed that if Michael Gaine is still alive, he said if he is alive, to get in contact with somebody. To a certain extent, they have to say that, don't they? But then, the fact that has been raised makes you go, okay, they haven't ruled out that he is still out there, and hopefully he is. It's such a strange case. It's really bizarre.
the commissioner effectively said today, on Tuesday, we don't know what has happened to him. Now, that's 4 weeks in. As I say, every contact leaves a trace forensically. So, in the worst case scenario, there could have been blood or signs of a struggle in the Jeep. And there was obviously nothing there because they haven't upgraded it. So I don't think they have anything, really.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, just another thing that's come up, I say interestingly, it could have absolutely nothing to do with it as well, but just an interesting thing that came up the other day was, I was told that when Michael went missing on the Friday, a couple of his friends, close people who knew him well, went to look for him on the farm, and they came upon a man working on that RAV4, fixing brake pads on the vehicle. They said hello to him, and that was it. That was the only encounter they had. They continued to search the farm. They didn't find Michael. It's only in hindsight that they kind of said maybe they should mention that. And, obviously the guard's going to look at the significance or not of that. But obviously later that day, that afternoon, that exact vehicle was seized and the phone and the wallet were found inside of it. So maybe at least as far as the person who was fixing the vehicle was concerned, there was nothing untoward or unusual going on. And I was told apparently that vehicle was going to be brought in for an NCT. That could have significance. That could have absolutely no significance. But it's just another added element to the mystery, I suppose.
And Paul, I'm always very careful of this. We are reporters. We're not detectives. We don't have access to all the data. And actually, there's one interesting vignette, or wee nugget, in our interview with the minister, because he was being pressed because he said, look, I won't go into the whole detail. It was a confidential briefing I got from the guards, but he said, I was told nothing to indicate murder. And he was pressed and he was asked, do you not think the public have a right to know what's going on? And he went, no.
He said no.
Yeah, he said, to be honest, I don't think that, Garda have the right to work. Essentially, Garda have the right to work in the background on this without having to, give an update every 2 minutes. And I thought that was very refreshing to him to be so direct.
Yeah, well, and I can understand that as well. I mean, Alan Bailey did say something which is true of any investigation, that, Gardaí may have information which they don't want to put out there. And if they did, it may compromise the investigation. For example, they might know something that maybe they know only a small cohort of people know, and they don't want them to know that they know, basically. So maybe they're keeping their cards close to their chest.
Yes, but for the commissioner to say no leads and then not correct, expand on that rather than go, it can be slips of the tongue, but he's a very experienced police officer, north and south. So
would you say, based off your own expertise, that at this point, if they suspected foul play, that the commissioner would say, look, I mean, would they come out and at this point, 4 weeks in, and say, we believe it is foul play?
Right. Just in my experience, right, I would find it very strange if the commissioner did have information about there being foul play, that he wouldn't have moved on, at least from with no leads. And it's a missing person case. In my experience, if they had something, a smoking gun, to use a metaphor, I think he would have resigned or moved on or moved up the ladder of the chain from that. Do you know what I'm saying? He would have been a bit more, well, look, it could have been suspicious or there's something we're not happy about. It's just very strange that he said no leads, that the commissioner said he's not been indicate murder, and that the commissioner said it's a missing person case after nearly 4 weeks. It's just a real mystery. But maybe they have something, but just from my experience, I haven't done this for such a long time, it's a bit strange that he would say that if they had something.
It is strange. Alan pointed to the scale of the investigation and how quickly it got going. I asked him whether he'd ever seen an investigation of that, a search of that size. He said he hadn't, not that quickly. I mean, he's obviously been on massive searches, but somewhat down the road. He commended the Gardaí and the civil defence and defence forces and all that for getting involved, but he did say he'd never in his lifetime, in his career, seen a search of that scale from day one. And he was kind of putting out there the possibility that, okay, was that on the basis of they knew or they suspected something was seriously wrong from the get-go, that the search was that large? Now, he's only just asking that question, but he's suggesting that perhaps investigators, there was a red flag from day one that something really sinister had happened to him.
look, Alan obviously knows his onions, and I think that's a very valid point. But it's just, I keep coming back to what the messaging from the minister and the commissioner, and even the superintendent said, Michael, if you're still alive, whatever, to paraphrase him, if you're still alive, get in contact with somebody. So, look, we're very lucky if we get to hear 5 or 10% of what's going on. And maybe they have something, but I'm just looking at the front-facing language of all those three people, the superintendent, the commissioner, and the minister, and none of them have given any indication that they have something. I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Very interesting.
Keep an eye on it as it goes into a fourth week, unfortunately. One thing you wanted to, we should talk about, there is a bit of a controversy over whether or not cavity searches are taking place. So just bring us up to speed on this, because this is something that's come up down at the conference.
It did. So this happened on the 31st of March outside Leinster House. There's a group called Mothers Against Genocide. They're from North and South, my understanding is, and they are there to protest about Israel's continuing actions, military actions, what a lot of people allege is genocide in Gaza. And there's huge Irish support, I think, for the people of Gaza. So that's beside the point. Essentially, what happened on the 31st of March, there was a number of arrests under the Public Order Act outside Leinster House. Now, there were 11 women arrested and 3 men. Obviously, when people are arrested, they're brought to Garda stations and they're searched. Now, as a result of that, there were claims inside the Dáil, which has privilege, which is what we'll come to, but outside the Dáil as well. People are, it was alleged that several of the women were strip searched and one woman was subjected to a cavity search. Now, a cavity search is very serious. And when I heard that, I was going, it's public order. But look, searches take place, and the cavity search, my understanding is that a doctor either has to do it or has to be present. So it was quite serious. And on the 1st of April, several comments were made in the Dáil. Now, when a comment is made in the Dáil, it's heavy because it's the national parliament and it's the national record and it's there forever. We can read this in 80 years' time. It's a historical document. It's very important. So as a result of that, the minister, Jim O'Callaghan, as he says right under the Garda Act 2005, he can ask the commissioner to make a report on any issue of concern to him. So he did. He asked the commissioner for a report on this, and he said on Monday evening to the AGSI conference that he got that report back. And now he emphasised that it was in writing, because I think when something is said in writing, just like when something is said in the Dáil, it's not ringing you up and saying this. It's a full written report from the commissioner to the minister of the day, and the minister said that the claims about the strip search and the cavity search were false. So the commissioner was down today, and we asked the commissioner about that, and he agreed, and he said that the claims about the strip search and cavity search were inaccurate, and he's actually writing to the Can-Corda, Verona Murphy. I think to express it, I think I asked him, I think it's basically to express his disappointment about what was said. Now, it is important. Dáil privilege is really, really important. And there have been cases about this. So it won't be unsaid. And I think it's really important, not that my opinion counts, that politicians do have that freedom to say things. But I'm not the person. There are 2 female Gardaí who were involved in this. So the commissioner actually said he had contacted those Gardaí, had spoken to them face to face and gotten a full account. But there was also CCTV footage and body cams. The body cams are in. And now I don't think there was CCTV footage or video of the actual search, but he is 100% that the cavity search and the strip searches did not happen. Now, the politicians who said it are standing by their comments. So I don't know what's going to happen to it, but I think the minister was very keen to stress, as was the commissioner, that following their investigation, the commissioner is satisfied that these things did not happen.
I doubt it's going to be left there. I think there'll be some politicians unsatisfied with that answer. But
yes, I think they already are, and they're, as I said, they're standing by their comments. But Dáil privilege is very important.
Yeah. So the other aspect we want to talk about from AGSI is citizen journalism.
Right. We're going to get in trouble for this, aren't we?
Probably.
Yes. Not unfairly, Gardaí aren't happy about being filmed. I think it's, if there's an Inspector Amanda Flood who's based in Store Street, Garda Station, and she said she is supervisor of supervisors. And, young Gardaí, they do find this annoying and, intimidating and aggravating and probably a pain in the neck. That, you have these things called auditors. I don't know if you've ever seen that on TikTok. Very popular in America and in Britain. Bit of it here, but you have what they're called citizen journalists. You and I are citizen journalists because we're not. Anyway, that's another day's work, right? There's people who say they're citizens.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, hold on. Are you a citizen? I'm a citizen.
Yes, but I am a journalist. I am employed as a journalist. That is my occupation.
I know, but
you can't be a citizen doctor or a citizen teacher or a citizen fucking builder.
Yes, but it's not the best term for me because there's very few journalists in Ireland who aren't citizens, right? And citizenship is very important, right? But anyway, look, we're not going to have a row with those geezers.
Go on.
They can call themselves what they want, right? I know who I consider real journalists, and I think you do as well. But to these people, and they can claim what they want, let them at it. That's fine. But Inspector Flood did talk about this, a very aggravating issue, and she wants training for Gardaí on how to deal with this. And and she didn't really mention laws. I thought they were going to mention that they wanted some sort of laws, but it's a bit of an issue. Certainly, Gardaí I speak to are quite frankly fucked off about it. Now, the counter view of that is the view of people involved in this would be, suck it up. You're a public employee and it's a public street and I can film who I want. And it's quite hard to argue against that as it is, because, Paul, we film people in public. And if there were restrictions on what are called citizen journalists, do you not think it would come against us as well?
It would. I mean, how do you prove in the moment, who you are? And you'd have to bring out every form of identification there is. It's a tricky one.
It's a very, very. I do feel forgotten. Look, I haven't had one of these geezers filming me, but I know a couple of journalists have. And what do you do? My attitude would be, I'm just going to walk on by.
Yep.
Because I think they want that engagement, but everybody reacts differently. And I know a journalist I know engaged with them. I wouldn't have done it, but everybody can react their own way. But I do think they want engagement. I do think they want a reaction to people. So, as somebody said, silence is violence, and you just walk on. But I haven't been in that situation. Maybe I might get all gingery and lose the head and go at them.
Well, I have seen, one such encounter. I think it's probably the one you're referring to. And in fairness to that person, they stood up for their occupation and they also tried to explain, albeit they were fighting a losing battle, to this person. I think they were being accused of ignoring a particular case. And he said, well, I'm not ignoring it. It's just that legally it can't be talked about right now. Do you understand the law? And this person just doesn't understand the law and is trying to make out that there is censorship going on purpose. I mean, they did their best, but in the end of the day, they're out for their own agenda, and it doesn't suit them to have a debate. They just want to shout in your face. I'm vastly generalizing here. I'm not saying every single person who's going out filming is like that, but these people who call themselves so-called citizen journalists, they have an agenda. But I think to a certain extent, any citizen, just my opinion, which I shouldn't really give, but anyway, it has a right to come and sit in a courtroom, has a right to give an opinion on something, whatever. But that's what it is. It's just you and your phone and your opinion. That doesn't make you a bona fide journalist, and in some way mean that you're qualified to talk about this subject on some sort of a pedestal. And by the way, I'm not saying that I am either, but at least I can speak about my profession in a professional manner, and I can be held accountable for that. Certain people who just go out and do it on a whim can't be held accountable for that. I'm not saying by the law. I just mean, if I suddenly print a lie tomorrow, I will be held accountable legally. These people won't, and that's problematic. But I'm not saying lock them up for that. I'm saying maybe social media companies should be holding them more accountable, and that's not happening.
I spoke to a journalist I know in Spain, because I've had experience with this. I got into a bit of soapy bubble over in Spain for taking pictures of Spanish cops. They don't like it. And he was saying there's no fixed law, but police can go, right, I'm not having this, and they can seize your phone over there if you film them. So, I wonder how many auditors would go and do the Guardia Civil or the Policía Nacional in Spain. I think they'll go for the easy targets, which are Gardaí and police officers in the north and in England, where there is this tolerance, I suppose.
Do the Gardaí not feel, now that they have the body cams, that they have leveled the playing field? So film to your heart's desire, but they also have footage.
Well, yes, but will the Gardaí release that footage? Look, I'll give you an example. Do you remember when Roderick O'Gorman was the minister and there were protests outside his house?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And wasn't it the case that there was footage put out, but it was edited in such a way that it appeared the Gardaí had been powerless, when really what happened was Gardaí got there very quickly, told them to move on, and they moved on. Mm-hmm. But the way it was edited, and Inspector Flood did talk about this, that things are edited in a certain way. It's not the whole live or raw footage. But I can't see, Gardaí releasing body cam footage. I just can't. I don't think it's in their psyche to do that.
I mean, it has happened in other countries.
Yes, but we're going to go down this road of, in my opinion, the guards have a bit of a problem with all this stuff. Look at, mug shots and all that sort of stuff. You get them in England, you get them up north, but not down here. So the guards, in my mind, would be very, very, very reluctant to release CCTV or body cam footage. I have to be honest.
Well, look, it's an interesting debate. I don't know. We could argue about it all night, but I mean, I think to a certain extent, we're in the social media era, and everybody is using their phone now for various reasons. So it's kind of you get with the times,
I'll just make one more point. Sorry, Paul. Inspector Flood. And she wasn't even okay. Guards find it very aggravating. But what Inspector Flood did say was that there have been cases where, there have been victims of coercive control, and Gardaí. She said she reveres Garda stations as places where people can go who are in trouble. And she did say that there were cases of coercive control when people were trying to get into a Garda station to make a complaint and seek Garda help, and they were being filmed by what she called auditors. So that's a very serious
intimidating
issue. Yeah, it can be for any victim of crime or anybody who needs the help of a Garda Síochána. If you're being filmed going into a Garda station, that's bad news.
Well, I mean, it's an important subject to raise, and I think it'll start a debate on it. Yeah, but it's not going to be solved tomorrow.
Yep. No, definitely not.
No. So look, I will leave it there because I want to let you get back to your, enjoying yourself with all the guards down in Killarney. So thanks very much, everyone, for listening to us, and we'll be back to you next week.
Yeah. Cheers, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.